All right. Welcome, everybody. You are here for today's expert interview. So, thank you all for joining us and listening to a little Stevie Wonder to start our interview today to get your blood flowing. We are here with the one and only Alison Harris, one of our KW Talent Implementation Pro strategists at that. And I'm super excited about today's conversation because everybody's got a superpower, right? And when we look at somebody's superpower, it's the thing that consistently shows up regularly in their world and in their business that they're really good at. And while Alison has many superpowers, the superpower she is here today to talk to us about is having difficult conversations. Now, what we're going to talk about today is going to be in the light of having difficult conversations in our business. However, be clear, these techniques of having difficult conversations work with your team members, they work with your clients, they work at home with your teenagers, they work with your spouse. All the same tactics about difficult conversations apply. And yet, we're going to talk today from a work perspective. So, Alison, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. Now, if there's one thing I know about people, it is that the vast majority of people like to avoid difficult conversations. They do not like to be uncomfortable. They don't like confrontation. They don't like saying things that might hurt somebody else's feelings. And they would rather run from hard conversations than willingly walk straight into them. You, however, do not have a problem walking into hard conversations. So, first, let's just talk about that for a second. Like, where in the ethos of Alison background, like, did this just show up one day? Did you always just not even realize you were having hard conversations and they were fine? Did this come through training and development and honing the skill? Like, how did you get to this point?
So it's kind of like a mix of that. So, first of all, I come from a family where we talk about everything. So, I was raised in an environment where things weren't off limits. And so, I think that that probably lends kind of into the natural state of how I was just raised. But I'll tell you, when I first started in this business and needed to have difficult conversations, this whole conversation doesn't have to be about firing people, but I'm sure it'll come up. The first time I tried to fire somebody, I left the appointment and she still worked for me. Like, I did not know how to fire people. So,
Well, I'm sure you're not the only person on this Zoom today who's had that problem.
yes, absolutely. So, and it was terrible because, I was anyway, I was trying to play good cop, bad cop with another person in my organization. And we were both good cop. It was terrible. So, I think it's really important to understand that even if you have this natural skill, it still takes practice. So, I number one was born into a family where we talked about tough stuff all the time, and I still do. Like, I had a really nice close conversation with just my mom last night about difficult stuff, difficult end of life stuff. We lost my dad not too long ago, and so we talk about the hard stuff. So that is just the natural side of it. But then when you take it into your business, you really have to have a plan, and you have to have it mapped out. You have to know what you want to say. And then I think even more importantly, as I've honed the skill even more, what I've really learned is that if there's already trust in that relationship and we've set up the expectations that they know that I'm going to have hard conversations with them because I love them, it makes it so much easier. So to answer your question, natural, born into it, like that's the family I was raised in. Number two, I have learned a lot of strategies. And number three, I think it's really important that the people that are in your world that you may have difficult conversations with, you have permission to engage. So we set the expectation that, because you're in my world and because I care about you, do I have permission to have a difficult conversation with you? Is that how you'd like to be communicated with? I even do it in my listing appointments. So, it goes all the way through.
Okay, so let's back up a second. You said
Yep.
something that I think is the first point we need to hit on, and that's expectations. I'm a firm believer in most failed relationships, whether that be personal relationships, working relationships, the person that you're sitting next to on the plane, I don't know, any relationship, no matter how short or long. I feel most of them fail because of unmet expectations. I think that's also true with our staff and our employees and our team members, right? So when we look at expectations, how do you enter into this and set the expectation of what conversations in your world and working with you look like? Like, start us from ground zero. Like, how do we do that? Is it right when someone's hired? Is it, oh, hey, by the way, like, how do you set an expectation with somebody about what a difficult conversation looks like?
I mean, it's mapped out in the career visioning process. I mean, it's right there. Like in the expectations conversation, there's lots of great questions in there. Like, how do you want to be engaged with? I can simply ask, how honest do you want me to be with you with feedback? And if you ask that question, most of the time people are going to say, well, I want you to be really honest. And
Okay,
then,
but let's really examine that. There,
okay,
everyone I know is like, I'm a 9 or a 10. I want you to be really honest. And then when I have a hard conversation with some of those people, they're like,
okay. So
so
that is
yes,
where
just because they say
trust.
so doesn't actually guarantee it.
Yeah, so that's so you have to remind them that that's the like so when you go to have the difficult conversation, there's the when you started working here for this team, I asked how honest I could be with you and you gave me a 9. And I said, and so I'll say, like, basically I'll ask for permission to engage again. Or I mean, that's one way to do it. Or if they know me well enough at this point, I've had enough of these conversations with them that they're expecting it. It's not like this is coming out of left field, because this is the sort of like the tenor of our relationship and how it's always been. So I think that the difficult thing is going to be for people who are listening to us having this discussion today, who have not set that expectation from the beginning, and then having to reset that expectation. And so maybe that's something that we should talk about, and what are some practical strategies for doing that? Because I've done it, so I don't surprise people when I hit them with my best shot. Like, I just don't.
Okay, so let's imagine not that any of those people are on this call today who would have skipped this section of career visioning,
Or
but
maybe not revisited. Yeah.
hypothetically speaking, let's imagine that they might not have covered that when they hired somebody, or they didn't use career visioning at all because they didn't even know what it was at the time, or they simply, it's been so long since they did that with the team member and they're like, I can't tell you if I did it or not. How do we walk in today? Let's say we've got a team member that's been with us for 2-3 years. Where in a small business, you work with somebody for 2 or 3 years, like you're
Oh
like
yeah.
this, right? Like you're close. You know their kids, you know their spouse, you know their life, you know their hobbies, their interests, you know when they're
Their
having a good
lunch
day, a
order.
bad day.
Yes.
Yeah, like you're emotionally connected to somebody that works in a small business after that amount of time. How do we now go in? What would you say is the best practice on going in and resetting the expectation of we're going to have some hard conversations? What would you do?
Well, there's a couple of ways to approach it. So, if you're working on your mission and your vision and your value, as a team, or you're trying to figure out what you want, like the culture of your team to be, you could work together as a group to reset the culture of the team. So, if this is like a systemic problem and you're not having these conversations with anyone, I actually think that this would be a good group activity to kind of realign, expectations around communication. So that could be something that happens in a team retreat. It could be something that happens over, a lunch that you bring in. But you can simply approach it as, I feel like we are not being as like honest and open with one another as we can be, and I would really like to reset the expectations. I want this team to be a safe place. There's a tremendous amount of trust on my team, and I think that there's a tremendous amount of trust because of how honest I am with them, and that nobody feels like there are side deals happening, or someone's being treated better than someone else, or nobody feels like they can come to me, because if I'm willing to have a difficult conversation with them, they then feel like they can come and have a difficult conversation with me, right? It's a two-way
Okay, well,
street.
let's not get there yet. That's the back half of the interview.
Okay. But so, I think you may find that in a group setting, that is a breath of fresh air if there are, sort of these underlying, stress points that are around communication on the team. So it could be done as a group setting. I don't want, so then that might be the easiest way to do it.
I love that as the idea, right? Because one, you get buy-in from everybody.
Right.
So it's not picking somebody out, like me picking you out and being like, Allison, I need to talk to you about having a hard conversation with you because you're in trouble, right? Like that immediately when we're segmented out, it's like, But if you're just realizing, like in general, we're not having some of the hard conversations we might need to have as a team, I love that idea of making it part of revisiting our mission, vision, and values. Because one, you should be revisiting those things frequently, at least once a year, if not twice, to make sure you're still in alignment and you're doing the right things. But two, Authorship is ownership. And if
Abs-
we bring them into the conversation around that, nobody likes to suck at their job. So they're going to want to hear if they're not winning at it, right? They just want to know that it's handled in an appropriate way. Everyone wants to know when they're off track, but they want to know in an appropriate way. So I love that. What if you're not, what if there's actually a problem? What if there's not just a systemic issue and you're like, I got a problem with Susie Q. And Susie is the only one I got a problem with. And I clearly was not clear on this. And I never set expectations. What do we do if it's just Susie Q?
Well, I have some great strategies for that as well.
Tell
Number
us more.
Number one, you never want to tell Susie Q that you need to talk to Susie Q and arrange for like an off scheduled lunch or something they're not expecting, because then there's going to be dread and fear going into it, especially
Red
if
flag, red flag, red flag. I've
absolutely.
never gone to lunch with Allison and now she wants to go to a private lunch.
Right. Yeah, that's scary stuff. I mean, keep in mind that the people who work for us and with us, sometimes they may be a little intimidated by us. Many of us are high Ds. Some of us have tempers. Some of us on the KPA, it says that we respond with a high emotional sense of vigor. So,
I've never been accused of that
yeah,
ever.
absolutely. So, keep in mind how they may view you. So that might be scary. So the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to do it in a regular one-on-one, which we should all be having with our team anyway. Or just pull them aside and say, hey, can I talk to you real quick? Because I don't think that the fear building up to this is really healthy or productive, and it could make them defensive. So, I really think that you want to kind of, you don't want them to feel, you don't obviously want to take them like and make them feel like you are attacking them in any capacity, but you want it to feel casual and like a conversation and not like an ambush. Right. So that's number one. And then number two, before you start having a difficult conversation with someone, you simply can start with kind of what you were saying a second ago. I really wanted to sit you down and talk to you about something important today. We're not in alignment on something. Say it however you feel like you need to say it. But I always go into those conversations. I know this is ridiculous, but I will have written down my talking points. So, first I'm going to say, this is what we're doing. We're going to have a difficult conversation. And then I'm going to actually lay out what those things are. And I will try to get buy-in from them. Say, I hope you know how much I care about you. And that's why I'm sitting you down today, because I want to make sure we stay in alignment and we're all working toward the same goal. And then isn't that what you want? And make sure that you've got their buy-in. And I think that that's really important. And if you've built trust with them, that should not be terrifying.
Well, and you'll know right away, right? Because you're going to see it in the body language. They're either going to be composed and be like, okay, or you get this.
Yes. And if you get that, and also too, if you get that, if you do it correctly, you can get out of that usually in 2 or 3 minutes.
Yep.
So you have to be really mindful, even if you find yourself sitting down against somebody who is putting up all of the walls. If you say the right things and they trust you, and they trust that whatever it is that you're saying is actually for their best interest, and you can get them to see that side of it, you will see actual physical relief come over them. Because frequently the thing that you're trying to talk to them about, they know is already a problem. This is not going to be a big surprise to them. So whatever it is, they know. And also, like, I think discussing it sort of takes the power out of it. It takes the power out of the fear. It takes the anxiety out of the problem. And then you can actually come up with a solution together that you can work on. And that does work in firing, actually. And it does work in realignment. And it does work when people are not on goal. It works on a lot of things. Because
hang on, you said something in there, though, that I want to make sure everyone hears before we move into the next part there, right? You said, it sounds silly, but I bring my notes and my key talking points. I want everyone to hear that and to understand that's not silly. And that's not because she doesn't know what she wants to talk about. It's because even the best of us can get distracted and go down a rabbit trail and start talking about minutia. Having a difficult conversation with somebody is not about detailing every little thing you did that I need to nitpick on that you did wrong in detail and detail and detail. That's nitpicking. Having a difficult conversation with somebody is about the overarching problem of, we've noticed inconsistencies in the way the paperwork gets done, and it's starting to become a problem. So we need to work on it. It's not, you got this wrong on this file, and this file had this missing, and this file didn't have that done, right? Like, it's not nitpicking. You're not beating somebody up. You want to highlight those key talking points. Otherwise, we can get dragged into difficult conversations, especially if somebody's being defensive. We can get dragged into the minutia. And so I think that was one of the things that I should have pointed out right when Allison said it, that I want to make sure everyone hears.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, also, if you've got your notes in front of you, it helps you stay on track. It helps you stay on target. And in addition to that, it's a great point. Like, you don't want a hard conversation to turn into an argument. It's pretty
Mm-mm.
important that the person who's having the conversation, me, stay in control of that conversation. And that, I don't know how to teach someone how to do that other than have your talking points lined up. Don't get into the nitpicky, don't get into the nitty gritty. Like, it is not a personal attack. Obviously, you are not angry. None of those things happen, right? But I think that it's really important to take into consideration that those notes and those thoughts will be your guide. And if you need a moment to compose yourself, it is not inappropriate to look down, take a deep breath. Remember, like, before you respond, sometimes you need to pause, because we don't need to respond in anger. We don't need to respond with the high level of emotional vigor. We just need to respond out of like trust and care. And like, those are the things that we need to take into consideration before we say something we may regret, of course, too, right? You got to keep these like happy and healthy, these conversations.
So let's imagine, right? You've set the expectation, you had the hard conversation with an associate on your team, and it was more of a get them back on track, not a let them go conversation in this case. Let's just imagine. How do we wrap it up? Like, how do you exit out of the difficult conversation and move back into the workday?
Ooh, well, I mean, of course, I'm super solution based. So my number one thought would be, to craft a plan with that person to get back on track and document it and know when you're going to revisit it, or set a date and time to sit down and do that.
Okay. So let me summarize what she just said, because both of those things are the exact same things. It's setting expectations on what happens next, right? And
That's
that's
right.
the key, right? If you want to close the loop on that conversation, it's set the expectation of what the next steps are going to be, because the conversation is never the end point. Like, let's just be clear. The conversation is just the door opening. So whether that's a difficult conversation with your teenager about their behavior, whether that's a difficult conversation with your team member about the fact that they're showing up dressed in inappropriate clothing, or if it is a difficult conversation with your ops person who is not getting the files done correctly for closings, it's never the end. The difficult conversation is just the door opening on it. We have to set an expectation that we're going to adhere to on next steps to close the loop on the hard conversation.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And then, I think that just like anything we do in this business, we should have a one-on-one scheduled with them in the not so distant future if they're a direct report to you. And, I think it's great to also ask permission to revisit that in the next one-on-one and make sure you set the expectations of, can I anticipate that you'll do these things? And then, of course, you always have to inspect what you expect, right? So whatever it is that you are addressing, that it can't be a one-off and you're done and your hands off at that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
walking them through what it is that needs to be corrected, and then kind of walking them through the solution, and then making sure that the solution is actually, sort of,
Viable, like
yeah.
it will actually work and
Mhm.
accomplish the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and then even beyond that, it's 3 months down the line, you need to also inspect it to be sure it hasn't fallen apart again. And truly, if somebody on your team has, if you've identified a problem, you've had the hard conversation, they've put a new system into place, or, they've done whatever it is that they've done, do not forget to compliment them and thank them, because, that also is closing the feedback loop. Hey, I noticed that this is actually getting done at a really high level and I really appreciate it. And I want you to know that I noticed. That makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And that also continues to build trust.
Builds it, right? You're just adding more layers of trust. And it's, this person cares about me and they're going to help me succeed. Not this person's trying to beat me up to get me out of the business because they don't like me and they're nitpicking on me. It's, they care and they want me to succeed. So what successes have you had in, like, what have you learned through your ability to have hard conversations, right? Like, what have you seen happen in your business or in your relationships through having these hard conversations that you think might not quite have worked out so well if you had avoided it, or some learning lessons of avoiding it if there was ever a time?
Well, I will tell you, going back to the first time I tried to fire somebody and then she still worked for me at the end of the conversation, it's not like that problem went away on its own. Like I eventually had to put on my big girl panties and actually do the work there, right? And I had to get brave and do it. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is if you don't address it, it's not going to be solved. Like, it
It
starts at
doesn't
the
just
top.
disappear.
No,
Yeah.
it's not going to disappear. So even if your first attempt at it doesn't go well, you're going to need to do it again. The other thing I'll say, and we you hear this all the time in the Keller Williams universe. If you have easy conversations, you'll have a hard life, and if you have hard conversations, you'll have an easy life. If there is no like stress or strife or concern or upset behind the scenes, a lot of this stuff is like non-tangible tension is what I would call it. Like if things are not going well and you are fed up with something, that's going to continue to eat at you and stress you out. And then it's also going to take a tax or, a toll on that relationship that you have because you're frustrated with that person. So I think the most important thing to understand is that you can make all of that yuckiness go away by just having a conversation. And that is actually a huge lesson to learn. If something feels difficult or if it feels hard, you can take all the power out of that yuckiness just by having a conversation, which does make it a superpower. And it's one that we should all step into because it creates these really, teams that feel safe, teams that build trust, teams where you can rely on one another, and also too, like teams that'll have like deep conversations with one another. And I think that's really important. We had a great conversation this morning about enabling others and, how that has looked in our own lives. And that was just a kind of off the cuff conversation that we had in a team meeting. It wasn't planned. It wasn't scheduled. It was we were just talking about one transaction and a little problem, but I don't think my team would have sat in a room and opened up about all of that if we didn't have this kind of honesty within our universe. And, I truly feel like we talk about so many deep things. And I think it's because I've set the tone for that. I'm very authentic. I say exactly what I think, sometimes to my detriment. And, that's kind of self-depreciating. I don't actually think it's to my detriment. I think that I really do say what's on my mind, and it usually serves me very well.
Good. Now, we talked about the team having hard conversations back up the chain. A lot of times it's not easy for a team member to come to the boss, to come to the supervisor, somebody who is typically a significantly more assertive personality, and then is also the figure, right? Like they're the boss figure of something, and say, hey, I've got a problem with you. I got a problem with the way you're doing this, or I got a problem with the way you're showing up. And while I would love to say that we're all perfect, none of us are, right? And I think it's important that we have that feedback coming back up the top too. Otherwise, we get what I call billionaire's disease. And it's a real thing. It's been studied that the higher up somebody goes in the food chain of a top organization, the less feedback they get on their performance, and their ability to grow slows down. But if we've got a business and we're running a business and we want our business to grow, we can't slow down on our growth. How do you ensure, and how do you, when somebody brings you feedback up the chain?
Well, I think I want to kind of take it back just a hair. I think what's
Go
really
for it.
important in that is to set the tone of participation, and you have to set the example. So I think of that as like, we do our numbers and we call out our, exactly, what we've done the week before. This is our little tracker in our sales meeting. And though I am not as active in production as I once was, I take that very seriously, and I am always the first to report. So Anna knows, my director of operations knows to ask me first. So then I set the tone for the room. So I think it's important to remember that we set the tone, as the leaders. And, if we are expected to do something that they're participating in, we better show up and we better do it well. because we are setting the tone. Because if I start saying that I'm having 8 conversations a week, what are they going to start doing? Saying that they're having 8 conversations a week. But if I'm having 65 conversations a week, they will try to beat me. So I think that's important. So I think that it's really crucial that as leaders that we continue to participate in the same like ways everyone's being measured on the team. So that feels important to me, as long as we're still in a job and a capacity where we are doing the same activities that they're doing.
You're not just the boss, you're a peer.
That's exactly right. And I make that very clear. And all my stuff is tracked in all the same ways, and it's tracked in a very public way. Right. So that also creates a continued sense of trust. But if somebody needs to tell me that they don't like how I am doing something, and I have been approached by people on my team, and I know that it's scary, as soon as I realize that they're trying to talk to me about something, I make sure I sit down with them, that we're on the same level. I don't want to be standing over them in any way.
Right.
Like, that's important. And then it kind of goes back to script practice. Like, you mirror and match. You make sure that you're kind of matching their tone. And then I ask a lot of questions. I think that you actually stay in control of a conversation best if you ask a lot of questions. So slow your brain down enough to not get defensive, and ask the qualifying questions, and really take their feedback honestly. Sometimes it might be a bunch of baloney, and they may be upset about something that you're not in control of, or it's really because of their own failure, or it could be a ton of different things, right? But make sure you take the time to listen, get to the bottom of it, poke a little bit if you have to, and make sure that they honestly know that you care and that you're listening. So slow down, take a deep breath, do not respond with high emotional vigor, and really listen.
Well, and I think it's important that you say that of they need to hear, right? They need to hear, because if we break the trust of they got every ounce of courage likely they had to come to you and say this, and to talk to you about something that they're either upset about, or they see a problem with, or that they disagree with. And then we just dismiss that concern. Oh, that's unimportant. Oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. You're just overreacting. I don't know about you, but I've never calmed down when somebody has told me I've been overreacting.
No, it'll fuel the fire.
There's like a vein right over here.
But like, what if I say something like, is that the first time I've made you feel that way?
Much different.
When else
Right?
have I made you feel that way? Can you walk me through that? How did that make, like, do you know why that made you feel that way? Or can you explain, why you reacted that way? There's so many different ways that you can slow it down and make them feel
Heard and understood and validated, because we're not all perfect. We don't have perfect behavior. We certainly don't say everything right at the right time. Small businesses are chaotic, messy, hazardous places, right? Like, there's 1,000 things moving at any given time, and we're doing our best to move it forward correctly at any given moment, but there's going to be 1,000 hiccups along the way. And I think it's really crucial for our team members to be able to come do that. And right, like you hit it on the head of how you respond when they do that makes the difference on if that person stays in your world and leans further into your vision and your mission of the business, or if they retract and ultimately leave, right? They might not leave that day, but if they know it's now becoming an unsafe place for them to voice concerns, they're immediately withdrawing, right? More and more and more, till eventually they're going to withdraw to another business.
That's absolutely correct. And, I think it's really, and that goes back to the trust and building trust with people in your world. It's really important to me to be transparent. And, it's really, and that is actually in our, our little culture code we've written for ourselves, is transparency is very important. I don't ever want anyone to feel like, they don't know what's happening, or they don't know why something is some way. And it's setting that culture from the very beginning, and then revisiting it and making sure the decisions that you're making are within culture. I think that is the secret sauce to having hard conversations, you have to like ingrain it into the world of the team.
It's not just the thing that you believe, it's part of the systems that run the business every single day.
Absolutely.
All right, we're down to our last minute. If you've got a moral of the story, a mic drop, a learning lesson, if they take nothing else from this conversation today, what's the one thing you want everyone watching today to take away?
Imagine you could take the thing that drives you the most crazy and eliminate it in your team immediately. You can. You just have to have the hard conversation around it and make sure that you have the trust with the team member or team people that are causing this problem, and you can eliminate, all of that strife and all of that stress. You just have to be very careful and conscientious. Make sure you identify what the actual problem is. You don't shift blame. You try to find the overarching way to fix the problem, and then you walk them through it, and it'll be a relief to them too, because I promise you, if you feel it, so do they.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. And here's what I want all of you to take today is, and Allison said this, and you've probably heard it from other people, and I want you to hear it again. So in case you get off today and you forgot and you're like, what was that thing? Easy conversations, hard life. Hard conversations, easy life. Hard conversations are only hard for a couple of seconds. And then it makes the rest of everything get into alignment and much easier. So, Allison, thank you so much for being our expert interview today. We
Welcome.
appreciate your time. I know everyone found good value in this. To the rest of you, we are going to drop some links in the chat for you. We've already been dropping a couple on here to some of our future events, future expert interviews, some information. If you are curious to learn more about KW Talent, it will be right over there in the chat for you. And we will see you all on our next expert interview. Have a great day.